In the previous 2 seasons of Gamma Haven, players would choose an existing pre-made story prompt to respond to. And those story prompts were very broad and acted as rails that would keep characters somewhat within a topic, plot, and purpose. And how the player defined their character's relevance to what was going on would be which prompts they would choose and picking where they would want to fit in the story at. This thing that's going to happen without them, they get to choose where to be when this thing is happening. And there could be upwards to 5 or 6 prompts at a time back then. And, players would choose where they would want to forge that path. And from season 1 and 2, this approach would often morph as I began to experiment with the freeform approach that would allow players to submit their own actions absent of a prompt. And I would proceed to form a story out of everyone's actions. And suffice it to say, with 30 plus players or characters and counting at the time, that was a lot of work, and that didn't get easier, but damn, did I have a lot of fun seeing everybody's submissions and transforming those actions into a cohesive story. And though it wasn't always perfect, I was able to kind of make some order out of the chaos, and that was always the intention of P&D, and I felt like that was being fulfilled. This gritty, superpowered sci-fi adventure grew deeper and deeper with every new rule change and every new character that came into the game. And it brought us crashing into season 3, slowly but surely. In season 3, we experimented with a new approach to this interactive storytelling, by dividing up all the drama into 3 separate arcs. I felt that if we could divide the events up, we could have 3 story arcs that were widely different from one another, each having their own little unique flavor or cast of characters and tone. And I wanted to see which characters would shine and truly steal the spotlight. With 3 arcs sharing the same universe and lore, there was bound to be overlap. However, for the most part, the events really kind of panned out the way I was hoping for them to be. Very different. The 3 arcs were truly evolved and escalated into their own drama-filled stories. And I want to recap those because it's really hard to lose sight when 1, it's all audio, 2, there was so much time in between the releases, and 3, we're going on 4 or 5 months since the last one. So I wanted to recap just so we can all remember how we got to this point and why these final episodes that are going to be coming unfolded the way they did, the way they will. So at the beginning of season 3, act 1, players were asked to choose from 3 story arcs to commit to. And each of these arcs were soft continuations of climactic events that had transpired from season 2. And they acted as the foundation of the entirety of season 3, these arcs. These arcs were as followed. Gray areas, Nebby Haven colonies, which was actually based off of some lore that was submitted. All 3 of these were actually. And electronic panic. Those were the 3 arcs. So, gray areas. This arc was a political and divisive arc that introduced a few new components to the setting, including a governing figure titled the Advisor. In season 2, we learned that the entire planet is artificial and is astronomically complex. It's an astronomically complex machine that is no longer being operated properly due to its overlords being disbanded. The people that were in control were no longer in control. And this wasn't public knowledge either. Until this day, it's only known by a few select characters such as Gale Gordon, Tempest, aka Tempest. This had resulted in the depletion of resources necessary to keep the tank operational, resources that were virtually unobtainable by its inhabitants, and no one could figure out why all of a sudden everything was wasting away in some shape or form. And matters escalated when visitors from a dying space colony named Anvil Station came to the tank seeking refuge, And these visitors not only arrived during an energy crisis, but also right after a war with several enemies, including Anarchy 12, the Iron Empire, and of course that cancer, the Survey Day cult. So the advisor stepped in and mandated that for the safety of Haven City, these mysterious visitors, which have been dubbed migrants, needed to be isolated within the confines of Camp Rust, where all refugees of war have been kept up to this point. So this sparked outrage with migrant sympathizers such as Haven Guards, Haven's largest faction, the Haven Guard, and that would begin to create some civil unrest and generate a need for a true governing force. So essentially, all of the players who went into that story arc were either there to show support for these new characters, these new people from outside of the tank, and stand up for them. And it would also be an entry point for any new characters or any new players that were going to join the game. They could, instead of being born or being of Haven City, they could have come from outside. So if you were anything but one of the races, you would be from outside of the tank, and thus this was an opportunity to come into the story by way of Anvil Station. So you got these new characters coming in. So, you know, if you were in the city, you were making a decision of supporting people coming from outside of the tank, or you were just you were wallowing in all the chaos that was happening in the city, of course. Or if you were a new character, you could say, hey, I'm coming from outside of the tank into this chaotic place. It's all new to me. And then you also had a choice of going to Niboo as well. But that's how this started. And then in Act 2, the source of it all was what Act 2's phase was called for this particular story arc. This is when Gate Intelligence learns of a resource called the Source Code, which could potentially be the remedy to the resource crisis. So I'm not going to go into too much detail as to how this information was obtained. You can always watch the episodes where I ask somebody. But they were able to get information and knowledge about the source code, which they didn't know what it was going to do, but it was likely going to solve their problems. That's as much as they knew, but they had to locate it. It was in the Instigator ship. So their goal was to hopefully reprogram their existence in a way that it became more sustainable. However, the Gate Center was not the only faction to learn of this key item, and so the race for the source code began, resulting in Arc-Bionic Sagenar seizing it for himself, but not until after a rogue Gate agent ally by the name of Leaf uploads itself, because Leaf is not a he or she, it's. So Leaf uploads itself into the source code because Leaf, his whole goal is, nobody knows his true goal, and I mean, unless he told somebody, but that's going to be something that we're going to see what his goal or what its goal is. But meanwhile, there's more civil unrest in Act 2, stirring between Haven Guard, migrant supporters, and an ugly, hateful faction called the Hyperion Advance, who seek to strong-arm migrants into submission for the sake of the city. And Tempest, he finally received some assistance in trying to manage peace and harmony in Haven from a fellow politician named Mfano Nguvu, who is a very interesting character from the Anvil Station. And together they form a body of governing officials called the Haven Lords, which was a lore submission. So in Act 3, there's going to be an attempt to mandate some key power plays to bring order to the chaos inside of Haven City once and for all, with the Haven Lords at the helm of that. So that should be interesting. Then there was the second arc, the Nebby Haven Colony arc. After the mass exodus of the Nebby natives over in Niboo, and the destruction of the resurrected Necrofiend Emperor Nuad, the entire continent and the entire colony of Niboo has been terraformed into a sprawling jungle. So it is now a continent full of opportunity and exploration, and this has attracted several groups. So just to rewind in regards to the terraforming, in the big battle with Nuad in the end, or as they were attempting to resurrect Nuad, but Rezanok was able to kind of keep that encased within his own body, and they had that fight one-on-one. But during that whole process, that whole battle, there was a fight. And Oh man. There were a couple people that were in support of that ritual, and so the Gokin were fighting, and then throughout that battle, Epony was slayed, and that resulted in the continent of Nibu turning into what it turned into, which has attracted several groups. Haven natives and from various communes of Haven City, many different races. They're in search of a new start, a fair shake at life, away from the corrupt Haven City. So they were attracted to this place. They came over. These groups migrated under the supervision of Haven Guard, and they were led by a few prominent leaders. Ika, John Quill. I believe there's another one. His name doesn't come to mind because I think they disappeared. Refugees from Anvil Station who were coming from Anvil, and they were opposed to landing inside of an unknown hostile city, dealing with all that political crap. They opted to land in Nibu, and those were the Wanderers. It's fitting for a name like that. They wandered away from the main group, from the main colony, and they decided to also land in Nibu and colonize Nibu with those coming from Haven as well. And then last but not least, Atlas CEO Jeremiah Oliver never took his eye off of Nibu, and he continued his conquest over it. He's been putting in a lot of work. He was over there, trying to take it over back then before everything got crazy. So this time he had formed an alliance with several other powerful CEOs. He is not alone in this conquest for Nibu. So you see all these different people, these different fractions and groups come to Nibu. They both get set up, and then in Act 2, scales that tilt. We witnessed a few violent altercations between the Haven colonists and Atlas. They're bumping heads a bit, a little intimidation going on. The colonists feel like they can have everything and live in harmony, and Atlas is, they more so want the colonists to kind of fall in line and work for them. Atlas has some ulterior motives, such as harvesting the energy from this continent, this special energy that wasn't there until now. And we know, we learned that is likely because of Epony's sacrifice, or her defeat, or her death, or however you want to interpret that. But anyway, we began to see a massive power shift toward Atlas as they begin to build and secure jobs for the people of Haven and the Nebu Haven colony, because, let's face it, money talks. So Atlas, they begin to build a bridge between Nibu and Haven in order to exponentially increase trade. And both groups eventually learn of some iconic locations on the continent that contain power that they could use to leverage, and each of them need this because, Atlas, they're kicking ass. The Haven colonists, they're against the ropes. And when both parties, or someone from each party or side, discover this, they want to obtain this power. And it was these two temples. So they eventually learn, they obtain this power in ways only they could, which resulted in Atlas's ally Legion, and their whole encounter with this temple that Brezalek got to first and discovered some dragon scrolls and and he obtained some dragon power. Ultimately, he got defeated by Legion, who ended up getting, his own little new form of his offspring. He can assimilate creatures and kind of become them, kind of like symbiotes, or kind of like xenomorphs. But he ends up getting a giant, like, dragon nightkin beast form. He assimilates a dragon and starts to create his own. And then I believe one of the Wanderers, Morris, he acquires a mysterious artifact, and Kuth gets a giant duck. So, but it's really the bonds that were formed between Ika and John Quill and Razul, and everything that was happening at the colony during this time. Their bond with the people of the Haven colonies within the colony, and which is what we will see have a big effect later. And then the third story arc, Electronic Panic. There's a lot going on with this one, but ultimately what it boiled down to was After the aforementioned war with Anarchy 12 that resulted in the slaughter of many Haven guardsmen when their base was attacked, there was much fear and confusion around the reality of androids in disguise plotting to kill Haven guardsmen, or people in Haven in general. And Haven only had Haven Guard at the time to protect them. There was a lot of panic and fear over these android attacks on Haven guardsmen. But in addition, and very much unrelated to any of the political beef going on, there were androids that were becoming possessed by entities from the abyss, with the majority of them being hostile monsters. So as Ivan Bakara has control of the Ikermancer, this Ikermancer would pump souls. He's a dealer of life force. So whenever somebody wanted to, get out of the abyss and have a new lease on life, he was using Ikermancer to put their bodies or their life force into all these empty vessels that now littered the city. These androids, all these decommissioned androids. Once Anarchy went dark, so did the androids, but they were being their vessels were being used by these abyssal entities that were hostile in nature, and they would just attack people. So that was happening. As a safety measure and a way to decrease the number of attacks on the innocent and Haven guardsmen, these anti-tech towers have been erected throughout Haven City. And this has caused a bit of an uproar with android civilians and those reliant on cybernetics, for example. So this would also warrant the need for magic, a heavy reliance on magic, since technology was being nullified, electronics were being nullified out of fear, this panic that Anarchy was always listening, where he always had an android hidden somewhere near that was going to attack. So there was a reliance on magic in the form of these runes, these slabs that would be utilized for telecommunication, teleslabs, another lore submission. And this in turn garnered the much needed attention of those more knowledgeable of such things, who have detected some severe risk in the use of magic runes being adapted to the brain. So as we start to see more magic in the setting in the form of these teleslabs. And so we have some characters who have actual skills involving magic, and they're on it. They at the time they formed a little faction called the Emporium, the Solarium Emporium or something like that. And they all got together and wanted to kind of make sure that these teleslabs everything was going to be on the up and up. Vernali O'Connell was a big character who was outspoken against the use of teleslabs because of the risks that are involved with hooking up these magic rooms to your brains. Not everybody had the willpower. He was worried about maybe, possession or some kind of magical stuff, some magical hanky-panky going on with people's brains. And that was the direction that the story was going in. In Act 2, big and bigger dilemma. The study and research of these teleslabs escalated in a major way. A member of the Solarium Emporium, Min Gray, comes up with a genius way to safeguard all magical telecommunications with the use of hardcore eldritch rock music. She learns to use her legendary sentient guitar, Gruul Saber, to protect. However, after getting carried away with Gruul Saber, she sort of disrupts the cosmos, I guess you can say, and attracts the attention of a bitter rival who also happens to be a fallen eldritch rock god named Uneldu. And this nasty encounter results in a dimensional tear, a dimensional tearing rock battle that puts the planet at risk. And now Min Gray, Malross, and Vernali have to close this dimensional tear that was a result of Uneldu. She lost, but she left she left a problem with everybody, and that was a dimensional tear. And this dimensional tear, you start having beings appear from other dimensions, and they invade. You have these uncryptids lurking about, preying on the innocent. And an eldritch entity named Yertle, which is a player character who came in, and he begins to, or his presence begins to corrupt people with the madness that just radiates off of him. So, you have a dimensional tear, and now you have these teleslabs that are now being used. There's a grand teleslab now being used by these people who have gone mad. I guess you could call them a mad cult. They're attempting to use one of these teleslabs to create more madness in the city. So in addition to that, you have Malross, who seems to be very focused on reviving a district, but none of that will matter if the city is not there. So you have Malross, who he has 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He sees this as a great opportunity to work on restoring the frontier district, but coincidentally, this giant teleslab that's being used to create madness is in the frontier district. Yay, we get to kind of keep the story together. So you have Malross, you have Vernali O'Connell, and you have Sam Maximus, who's doing what he can to get the uncrypted situation under control. He's investigating it. People are missing. It's not public knowledge. Everybody doesn't know that these uncryptids are killing people. So he's researching that now. He's investigating that now. And then you have Vernali O'Connell, who really wants to fix all of this stuff, because this is right up his alley. So in Act 3, you're going to see how these three are able to really tie this all together and get things back to normal. But of course, within these 3 arcs, there are a lot of little mini stories that are happening as well, and some characters that return or do some things that you weren't expecting. A lot of you players like to stir the pot, and we'll get to see a lot of that in this finale, to the point where there's going to be a lot of things that happen that you probably didn't see coming. Even if maybe everybody kind of told what their, in the long wait, told their counterparts what they were doing. I know a lot of the fun is, ooh, let's see what happens. But even then, you probably could not predict what the result of those actions would turn into, or the result of your decisions. Maybe if you're doing something the same as someone else, that alone could create a whole nother string of events. So there's going to be some action. There's going to be some story. There's going to be there's going to be some disappointment. There's going to be some people who are not even in it because the submissions were in a way. But at the end of the day, I had a lot of fun writing it, putting it together, and it took longer than I wanted it to, but it's here now, and I get to put it into my little library of writing. So it's called Vicissitudes. The definition of vicissitudes is a change of circumstances or fortune, typically one that is unwelcome or unpleasant. And I felt it was very, very relevant to real life and what's going on in the show, in the series. And it just, that word resonated with me, and I thought it would be perfect for what has been created, what we all have created here. So let us continue. Stay tuned.